Soon it will be over. According to Takahashi, Xenoblade 3 depicts the conclusion of the Xenoblade story that began with Klaus's experiment. And with one major known story DLC remaining, questions are naturally raised how Xenoblade 3 is a conclusion exactly. The ending essentially spelled out that the story is continuing, so what exactly is Takahashi talking about here? Well, I definitely have my own theories and observations, so let's deep dive into this wacky timeline we all know and love, and see what exactly is being concluded in Xenoblade Chronicles 3. Klaus was some guy who used the mystical, otherworldly, and unknown powers of the Conduit to create a new world, splitting Earth into two different worlds. The Trinity Core Processor, the AI trio squad charged with looking after the Conduit, was subsequently ripped apart from one another, with Ontos, who we assumed to be Elvis, joining half of Klaus to the world of Xenoblade 1, where the half would go on to become Zanza and cue the events of the first game. Numa and Logos would be left in the world of Allrest, as the remaining half of Klaus takes up the role of the architect to try and rectify the sins of his past and create a new world in his image, creating the Titans and Blades and new humans that populated the Cloud Sea. And then sometime later, Amalthus came up to take Numa and Logos. Xenoblade 1 and 2 took place parallel to each other. As the events of one transpired, the other were progressing as well, until it all culminated with Shulk hitting Zanza with an RKO, awakening the third Monado, and creating a new world, and Rex defeating Logos, now known as Malos, seemingly losing Pyra and Mytha, and creating essentially a new world free of the gradual decline Allrest suffered for millennia. Both stories were mostly self-contained. I would argue about 99.9% self-contained, with one cheeky reference to Shulk's famous line being found in Xenoblade 2. However, both games were largely complete stories with no real need for continuation. Then we received Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition, and with it an additional story for Shulk and Melia of Xenoblade 1 entitled Future Connected, where a new foe would emerge, the Fog King, coming into the world of the Bionis through a mysterious, shadowy fog gate. Melia gets some nice resolution to her story. We defeat the Fog King with the Great Value Monado. Job done, right? Then we get Xenoblade Chronicles 3, seemingly throwing locations and even certain key characters together in a world perpetually gripped by the maw of war. We learn of Origin and the plan to save both beloved worlds from colliding into one another, subsequently destroying each other. However, before the calamity could strike, it is frozen in time by Mobius, before Origin could fully activate. We beat them in Hell in a Cell and allow Origin to continue activation, recreating both worlds and sending them on their way, saying goodbye to the best collab of all time, as each group of characters is forced to say goodbye to one another, promising to find some way to see each other again. And if that was the end of Xenoblade 3, then sure, I can see that being a very bittersweet finale to this epic tale. And I've seen people argue that Xenoblade 3 is the perfect ending for this entire narrative that began with Xenoblade 1, but it isn't, and people keep forgetting scenes and various lines of dialogue that are used throughout this ending. So let's bring them back up, shall we? For there is a post-credits scene that for some reason a lot of people tend to forget about. There's almost always a post-credits scene, and within we find Noah having returned to where he was before Ionios began, as the clock begins to tick away again, as the moment of eternity that was Ionios fades to memory, and then fades beyond even memory. Everyone seemingly having forgotten anything and everything that took place within that moment of time. Then, Noah hears the Agni and Off-Seeing tune and walks off into the crowd in search of its source, but he vanishes into thin air. And then we wrap up this game with one final save screen journal scene with Mio, where she states that it's hard to remember, memory retreating into the haze in her mind, but she promises she won't forget Noah until they can meet again. This she swears. Cut to the new main menu. And I have talked about how they decided consciously to end the game with these two scenes. And I don't think the Noah scene where he just disappears is metaphor. I don't believe that at all. Now, if you are like me, you are left off thinking this doesn't feel like a conclusion. This feels like it's building up to something. So where is Takahashi getting the conclusion bit from? Clearly he's in the right here. He's essentially the one in charge of the series. But the question to me is more a matter of perspective of what exactly Xenoblade 3 is concluding. Because if it's the universe, well, I'm sorry, I just don't see it. But I don't believe Takahashi meant universe. I think he's talking about the theme of the series that started with Klaus. This perpetual fear of the future and of the unknown. These whole grand analyses of various points of time, like the past, present, and future. We've done that message for Xenoblade 1, 2, and 3, and we've examined each 3 main periods of time. They've kind of finished this theme. Unless you want to rehash it some more, which you can kind of do it, with reuniting the worlds, if that's the plot of Xenoblade 4, and have it be that, okay, we've accepted the endless now isn't the way, let's put the work in and make the future that we want, which will undoubtedly be a message of Xenoblade 4, but I think they'll lean more so on the theme of unity and coming together to convey that theme, instead of relying on moving into the future is good, which has been the cornerstone of Xenoblade up to this moment. Xenoblade has always tended to focus in on 2 major topics per game that I tend to find. One in the first half, and it would transition to its more existential topic pertaining to the future in the back half. Xenoblade 1 had an analysis of human emotion, specifically relating to tragedy and loss, especially when it comes to revenge with Shulk and Dunban and Agiel. And I can go on and on and on with that theme for Xenoblade 1. Xenoblade 2 was about humanity and the evils that we do to each other, and how those can be amplified in a dying world, and how we respond to that. Do we choose to give in, or do we choose to try and make things better? Xenoblade 3 was all about a world caught in an endless war, and how that essentially ripped away humanity and the good aspects of life from these soldiers caught up as mere pawns in someone else's game. Quite literally, they made that an exact visual as Mobius essentially playing a chess game, while the soldiers of Agnes and Keves sacrificed their lives in service of this game that would never end. It would just restart over and over. And I think going into the future, Xenoblade will probably retain some aspects of being able to move into the future as a theme. It's a vague enough theme that you can kind of insert it whenever and wherever you want, but it will rely more and lean on these other themes that these games can tackle. And honestly, I'm kind of down for that. Some of Xenoblade 3's most touching and heartwarming and emotionally gripping scenes and parts were when it was just focusing on the parts that made Xenoblade 3 so unique, and when it just focused in on the tragedies of war. Those were my favorite aspects of Xenoblade 3. Remember when they all found out about babies and learning what a family was in the city? How Tyon was so overjoyed in that moment? It was so heartwarming, right? And put it into perspective everything that Ouroboros was fighting for at that moment. Remember when Ethel and Kamaravi finally took freedom back for themselves and chose to do what they want? Remember Chapter 5 with Noah and crew in that prison cell desperately trying to escape to no avail? Feeling like these grand machinations of this world were too much to bear and too high of an obstacle to overcome? Remember the introduction of the game? And when the Keves crew met with the Agnes crew in Chapter 1? Those are some of my personal favorite moments of Xenoblade 3, and I think that part of the reason for that is because Xenoblade is at its best, in my opinion, when it's telling an extremely human story, and those scenes really leaned into those aspects. That's the thing with Monolith's writing that I find so compelling, how they are able to craft these larger-than-life fantasy worlds and blend so many different aesthetics into them, and its overall hierarchies and structure and aesthetics, and use all of that to contrast against its very down-to-earth human stories and struggles that it showcases. It makes that story way more provocative for me, because that contrast is so great and it feels distinctly Xenoblade to me, while subsequently making the message stand out so much more because it's so noticeable and striking against this extravagant backdrop, where no matter how fantastical the world, people are still people at the end of the day. And for a game where at the end of it all, the main party and everyone had to separate for the greater good, I haven't been able to stop thinking about this. When have I got a comment on this a while ago? I'm inclined to believe that the theme of Xenoblade 4 will be all about unity. And like I said, ever since I got that comment a while ago, like a couple months ago, I believe, I'm just inclined to agree that I think that's going to be the theme of Xenoblade 4. And I would also add my own theory crafting flair to it all, and say that it'll lean more so on learning to overcome the differences of each world to come together for the greater good, and the common good. And I've made prediction videos about what I think even the gameplay of Xenoblade 4 will be like, and the more I think about it, the more it makes sense to me. I think a dual world setting is absolutely possible, and fitting, where somehow we'll gain the ability to communicate between each world using light. They already established that as a principle and a function of these two worlds with Xenoblade 3, and we'll probably gain the ability to send over some kind of spectral image of one party to the other world for the purposes of combat, and really lean into the interlink mechanic idea and flesh that out. And maybe even over the course of the game, the connection between these two worlds will get stronger, and therefore our mechanics in combat will get stronger as well. That could be an easy way to tie narrative into the storytelling through the gameplay. Sure, it's a pretty bold theory, yeah, absolutely, and we can't know for certain what it is Monolith is thinking at the end of the day. And their vision for 4 may be completely different to what I think the direction will be. But I can see something along these lines being entirely possible, and within reason for the kinds of stories that Monolith tend to tell. Could they go the route of Xenoblade 1 and 2, where it's 2 separate games set in parallel to each other time-wise, but in different worlds with different casts? Yeah, you could do that. I just don't see them doing that in a narrative that I anticipate to be all about unity and coming together, and bringing these two worlds together as one, despite the world itself seemingly saying no. And I know I kind of went off on a tangent there with my theory for Xenoblade 4, and while you may agree or disagree with that particular theory, the underlying point I'm trying to make there is that if Monolith choose to pursue other themes and messages, they can get very creative with their world design and set pieces and just overall storytelling and how they want to incorporate that into the game. In an Ask the Developer interview, they really went in on a discussion about the interlink mechanic and how that lends itself to the story of Xenoblade 3. And I'll leave a link to that discussion in the comments down below because I've talked about it before in previous videos, and it's a fascinating read. How you have these two foreign elements coming together, but they can't stay together forever, and they're eventually forced to separate. But with time, they're able to come back together again. And that's essentially the interlink mechanic. And even the story of Xenoblade 3 and the grand scale of it all. The window for their storytelling right now isn't just wide open. There just isn't any wall there, and Monolith have a chance to lean into their creativity and tell a very unique and interesting story here, and really branch out thematically speaking, and I'm looking forward to seeing whatever it is that they decide to cook up for us. So I'm going to call the video there for the day. Thank you all for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please leave a like and subscribe. It really helps the channel out and helps support future content, and I greatly appreciate it. And hit the bell icon to be notified for when I upload in the future. And leave a comment down below with your ideas, your theories, your wants, and your desires for Xenoblade 4, mechanically and story speaking. Let me know. I'd love to hear your thoughts and hear your perspectives and your opinions. Stay safe out there, everybody. Have a great day, and I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye, everybody.